Gangsta Granny, written by David Walliams, illustrated by Tony Ross.
Chapter 17. Planning the heist. For the first time in his life, Ben skipped to school the following morning. Through his love of plumbing, the previous night he had discovered that the Tower of London had a weakness. The most impregnable building in the world, where some of the country's most dangerous criminals had been imprisoned and executed, had a fatal flaw: a large sewage pipe that led directly into the River Thames. That ancient tube would be his and Granny's way in and out of the tower. It was a quite brilliant plan, and Ben's body couldn't hide its excitement at this amazing discovery. That's why he was skipping. Now he couldn't wait until Friday night, when his mum and dad would once again pack him off to Granny's. Then he would be able to convince the old lady that together they really could steal the crown jewels. Ben would bring along the diagram in Plumbing Weekly of the Tower of London sewage system to show her. The two of them could stay up all night and work out every detail of the most daring robbery of all time. The problem was that a whole fat week of lessons and teachers and homework stood between now and Friday night. However, Ben was determined to use the week at school wisely. In his IT lesson, he looked up the crown jewels and memorised every detail on the webpage. In history, he asked his teacher questions about the Tower of London and exactly where in the building the jewels were kept. That would be the Jewel House, fact fans. In geography, he found an atlas of the British Isles and pinpointed precisely where on the Thames the tower is situated. In PE, he didn't accidentally on purpose forget his kit like usual. Instead, he did extra press-ups so his arms would be strong enough to pull himself up the sewage pipe that led into the tower. In maths, he asked the teacher how many packets of Rolos you could buy with £5 billion, which is what the crown jewels were said to be worth. Rolos were Ben's absolute favourite sweets. The answer is 10 billion packets, or 24 billion actual Rolos. That's enough for a year at least. And Raj was sure to throw in a few extra packets for free. In his French class, Ben learned how to say, "I know nothing about the theft of," how you say, "the crown jewels, I am but a poor French peasant boy," in case he needed to pretend he was a poor French peasant boy in order to escape from the scene of the crime. In Spanish, he learned to say, "I know nothing about how you say, the crown jewels, I am but a poor Spanish peasant boy," in case he needed to pretend he was a poor Spanish peasant boy in order to escape from the scene of the crime. In German, he learned to say, well, I'm sure you get the idea. In science, Ben quizzed his teacher about how you might be able to penetrate bulletproof glass. Even if you got into the jewel house, removing the jewels was not going to be easy, as they were kept behind glass that was inches thick. In his art class, he made a detailed scale model of the Tower of London out of matches, so he could role-play the daring robbery in miniature. The week absolutely flew by. Never had school been so much fun. Most importantly, for the first time in his life, Ben couldn't wait to spend time with his granny. By the end of school on Friday afternoon, Ben felt he had all the data he needed to put the daring plan into place. The story of the theft of the crown jewels would be on the TV news for weeks, on every website and emblazoned across every front page of every newspaper in every country in the world. However, no one would suspect that the thieves were in fact a little old lady and an 11-year-old boy. They were going to get away with the crime of the century. Chapter 18. Visiting hours. "You can't stay with Granny tonight," said Dad. It was 4 o'clock on Friday afternoon and Ben had just got home from school. It was strange that Dad was home so early. He usually didn't finish his shift at the supermarket until 8. "Why not?" asked Ben, noticing his dad's face was dark with worry. "I'm afraid I've got some bad news, son." "What?" demanded Ben, his face darkening with worry too. "Granny's in hospital." A little while later, once they'd finally found a parking space, Ben and his parents went through the automatic doors of the hospital. Ben wondered if Mum and Dad were ever going to find Granny in here. The hospital was impossibly tall and wide, a great monument to illness. There were lifts that took you to other lifts, mile-long corridors, signs everywhere that Ben couldn't comprehend. Coronary care unit, radiology, obstetrics, clinical decision unit, MRI scanning room. Confused-looking patients on trolleys or in wheelchairs were being wheeled up and down by porters as doctors and nurses who looked like they haven't been to bed for days hurried past them. When they finally found the wing Granny was in, right up on the 19th floor, Ben didn't recognise her at first. Her hair was flat on her head, she didn't have her glasses on or her teeth in, and she was wearing not her own clothes, but a standard issue NHS nightgown. It was as if all of the things that made her Granny had been taken from her, and now she was just a shell. Ben felt so sad to see her like this, but tried to hide it. He didn't want to upset her. "Hello, dears," she said. Her voice was croaky and her speech a little slurred. Ben had to take a deep breath to stop from bursting into tears. "How are you feeling, Mum?" asked Ben's dad. "Not too clever," she replied. "I had a fall." "A fall?" said Ben. "Yes. I don't remember much about it. One moment I was reaching in the larder for a tin of cabbage soup. The next thing I knew, I was lying on the lino staring at the ceiling. My cousin Edna called me a number of times from her nursing home. When she couldn't get an answer, she called for an ambulance." "When did you fall over, Granny?" asked Ben. "Let me think. I was lying on the kitchen floor for 2 days, so it must have been Wednesday morning. I couldn't get up to reach the telephone." "I am so sorry, Mum," said Dad quietly. Ben had never seen his father look so upset. "It's funny because I meant to call you on Wednesday, just for a chat to see how you are," said Mum, lying. She had never called the old lady in her life, and if Granny ever called the house, Mum couldn't get off the phone quick enough. "You weren't to know, my dear," said Granny. "They did all kinds of tests this morning to see what's wrong with me. X-rays and scans and the like. I'll get the results tomorrow. Hopefully I won't be in here too long." "I hope so too," said Ben. There was an uncomfortable silence. No one quite knew what to say or do. Mum hesitantly nudged Dad and mimed looking at her watch. Ben knew hospitals made her uncomfortable. When he'd had his appendix out 2 years before, she had only visited him a couple of times, and even then it had made her sweat and fidget. "Well, we'd better be off," said Dad. Yes, you go," said Granny, with lightness in her voice but sadness in her eyes. "Don't you worry about me. I'll be fine." "Can't we stay a bit longer?" piped up Ben. Mum shot him an anguished look, which Dad clocked. "No, come along, Ben. Your Granny will need to go to sleep in a few hours," said Dad, as he stood up and readied himself to leave. "I'm quite busy, Mum, but I'll try and pop in over the weekend." He patted his mother on the head, like one might a dog. It was an awkward gesture. Dad wasn't a hugger. He turned to go. Mum smiled weakly and then pulled a reluctant Ben across the ward by his wrist. Up in his bedroom later that evening, Ben determinedly sorted all the information he'd gathered from school that week. "We'll show them, Granny," he thought fiercely. "I'm going to do it for you." Now Granny was ill, he was more determined to do it than ever. He had until tea time to plan the greatest jewel theft in history. I hope you enjoyed chapters 17 and 18. Join us next time for chapter 19.